All right, today we're diving into a topic that is just right on the razor's edge of our understanding of life and death. It's a real, scientifically documented phenomenon, but honestly, it's also deeply unsettling. It's called the Lazarus Reflex. So let me just ask you this, straight up. Picture a hospital room. A patient, maybe a loved one, has just been pronounced clinically dead. The room is quiet, and then their arm rises up. What do you do? What do you think? This isn't a scene from a movie, it's something that can actually happen. And there's a name for it, the Lazarus Reflex. The official definition is pretty straightforward. It's these spontaneous, involuntary movements that happen after a person is already clinically dead, usually brain dead. You see, it's just a reflex, but witnessing it is another thing entirely. So how did we even figure this out? Let's take a look at the history here and some of the real-world observations that brought this strange phenomenon into the light. You might think this is a recent discovery, but it's not. Doctors were noticing post-mortem muscle twitches way back in 1881. But get this, it took a full century until 1982 for the first formal case study to be published, giving it the name we use today. Now, it's a known, if unsettling, event in ICUs all over the world. And this is where the cold, hard science becomes intensely human. This quote from a heartbreaking case study in 2001 involving a child, it just gets right to the core of it. For a family, seeing that movement can create this flicker of impossible hope. It's not just some medical curiosity. It's a profoundly personal, emotional event. Okay, so the big question is, how on earth is this possible? How can a body move if the brain has shut down? Well, the answer isn't in the brain. It's in what you might call the ghost in the spinal cord. Let's get into the neurology. So here's the key thing you have to understand. When someone is declared brain dead, the main command center, the brain, is permanently offline. No thoughts, no consciousness, no voluntary control. But the spinal cord, it can still have a little bit of juice left for a short time. Think of it like the main power plant for a city going out, but a small backup generator can still flicker on a few streetlights. And here's how that backup generator works. It's a super simple circuit called a reflex arc. Something touches or moves the body, that's the stimulus. A signal zips to the spinal cord. And here's the crazy part. The spinal cord makes a decision all by itself, without asking the brain, and sends a signal right back to the muscles telling them to contract. It's a pure automatic loop. So what's powering this little circuit? Well, it's basically the leftovers. For a few minutes, there's still some oxygen and chemical messengers hanging around in the spinal cord. And maybe most importantly, the brain, which normally sends stop signals to prevent random movements, is completely silent. That creates this perfect but very temporary window for a reflex to fire. Okay, so we've got the how, but now we really need to dig into the so what. Because the science is one thing, but the real-world consequences for families, for doctors, that's where this gets incredibly complicated. And you're probably asking, okay, but how often does this actually happen? Well, studies suggest that about 15% of patients declared brain dead show some kind of observable reflex. So no, it's not a majority, but 15%, that's definitely not insignificant. It happens often enough that critical care staff absolutely have to be ready for it. What's really interesting is that the movements aren't random. There's a pattern. By far, the most common thing you see is the arms bending up. Curling of the hands and fingers is also really frequent. This predictability is actually another huge clue that this is just a reflex, not a sign of consciousness. 45. In some cases, these movements have been documented to last for up to 45 seconds. Now, just stop and think about that. 45 seconds is a long time to watch a body you've been told is gone move. It's more than enough time for confusion and false hope to set in. And that's the real fallout, isn't it? For a family that sees this, the emotional toll can be just devastating. It can spark false hope, which is then crushed. It can lead to confusion, fear, and even a deep-seated distrust of the doctors. It just makes an already impossible situation so much more painful. So you see, the ripple effects are huge. For doctors, it can complicate things. Ethically, it forces us to be incredibly strict and clear about what death actually means. And for families, well, it can cause lasting trauma. This is why understanding this reflex is so important. So where does all this leave us? Now that we know this happens, what do we do about it? How does this strange, ghostly reflex maybe force us to think differently about the very end of life? Well, for doctors and nurses, there's a pretty clear playbook. First, you have to know this is a reflex, not a sign of life. You have to follow the absolute strictest protocols for confirming brain death. But maybe the most crucial step, communication. If it's possible, gently preparing a family for the fact that this might happen can make all the difference in the world. If you walk away with just one single thought from all this, let it be this one. Our most basic, primal instinct tells us that movement equals life. But the Lazarus Reflex is this stark, biological proof that it's not always true. The body is a machine, and sometimes there are echoes after the operator has left. And that leaves us with one final, pretty heavy question. Science can tell us how this happens, but does a reflex like this force us to really stop and think about the what? What is that absolute final line between life and death? Is it a single moment in time, or is it a process? The Lazarus Reflex doesn't give us an easy answer, but it sure makes you ask the question.